Or to look at you?
Yeah. So can I ask you who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Janet Redman. I work with the Sustainable Energy and Economy Network at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C., where I have done a lot of following public finance in energy and climate policy.
Is it an NGO or what is it?
It's a think tank. It's actually the oldest multi-issue progressive think tank in the U.S., and we look at linking environment, peace, and justice in action.
So what are you hoping to hear soon on these screens over there? And are you hoping to hear anything, or what have you been doing the last today, for example?
Sure. Well, I work very closely with a network called Climate Justice Now, which is a movement of movements, really organizations and social movements, more than 150, that work together to look for local and global real solutions to the climate crisis. But in particular, we're interested in the idea of climate justice, which embodies economic justice, social justice, racial justice, gender justice. It's basically, the way I think of it, as the new framing for global justice movement. So a lot of what I've been doing here today and in the past 2 weeks is looking at the negotiations with an eye toward how we build a global justice movement. I think that you can look at the politics inside and the dynamics between developed and developing country positions, policies that people are putting on the table, but also it's really important to be looking at what's happening between the outside and the inside. The fact that one of the big successes of the Copenhagen is really going to be the consolidation of many social movements who've been struggling for land rights, indigenous rights, gender justice, the reparations for climate debt, really kind of coming together and recognizing that this climate problem is actually really just the physical footprint of a larger breakdown of an economic model that isn't working for people and isn't working for the planet.
So is it something to do with the way capitalism works and compared to other systems, or compared to more left-leaning politics?
Well,
or?
I think climate change is a problem. It's interesting. So Lord Nicholas Stern, who probably many of your listeners know, wrote a report in 2006 called the Stern Review. It looked at the economics of climate change, and he called climate change the world's greatest market failure. So I think what's really important is to recognize the fact that this is an ecological disaster, but it's created by a specific development model that runs along the ideas that instead of polluters paying for the destruction they've caused, it actually gives polluters a new rein on privatizing the atmosphere through carbon trading, privatizing forests through forest carbon trading. What we're looking at is a way of framing solutions to an ecological problem. What's happening inside the COP in the governmental negotiations is that they're kind of trying to do business as usual, a little bit cleaner, but making sure that industry and corporations still profit. What we're talking about in social movements and in the streets is we need a real shift. We need a shift in the way we look at the economy. We need a shift in the way we look at politics. We need to talk about the real ecological effects and imprints of the economy that we have today.
So over there in the Bella Center, do you know if business has access, and what are they doing? Are they writing some texts, or?
Of course we don't know whether business is writing text, but we can look at the physical spaces. What we do know is that folks like the International Emissions Trading Association has huge access to delegations, but also has events going on constantly. So they have a kind of access that the small NGOs, certainly the small NGOs, don't have. But when you think about the actual affected people, the folks who are most impacted by climate change, they don't have gigantic organizations, let alone business associations that look out for their interests. So the negotiating process, almost by definition, is really leaving out the people whose voices matter most in terms of both the impacts of the climate crisis, but coming to new solutions, coming to the food sovereignty, sustainable agriculture, local wind, solar, and other kinds of renewable energy systems. Those are the voices we're not hearing inside the negotiations.
So concretely, inside the Bella Center, what have you been able to do? Who are you able to talk to and stuff like that? What are you doing there?
Sure. I mean, we're doing a number of things. We can talk to delegates. We can work with other nonprofits, other NGOs who maybe have more influence and shift their positions to really allow them to see what social movements are calling for. We're able to do actions inside. We're able to hold side events where we can invite delegations, NGOs, other actors that are there to have information and sharing. But even I think what's important to recognize is this is a space where people can interact. And people are coming here to lobby their own governments, but then there's also a chance for relationship building, in particular between groups and movements in the Global South and Global North, which I think is one of the most exciting pieces of Copenhagen.
So just last question. What do you I mean, there's still some suspense, no,
Yeah,
going
certainly.
on. And
Yeah.
so what is the possibility right here, right now?
I think there are a number of possibilities. We may see that the negotiations completely break down. We may see what we would love to see is a legally binding agreement in the Kyoto Protocol track that brings us a second commitment period of binding emissions targets from the developed world, from the developed countries. What we're hoping to see is the United States step forward, which I think is probably pretty unlikely at this point. But what we need to see and need to recognize is that we're seeing civil society coming together in a way that's really exciting, and I think most importantly are going to hold our own governments at home accountable, so the next time this kind of a meeting happens, we have more power to assert on our governments to do the right thing for the climate and for people.
Sorry, I said last question, but I have
Okay.
just the last one. Is there some kind of justice that could be said of a proposition of the amount of CO2 per person in rich countries compared to the amount of CO2 in the poor countries? What is the actual
Sure.
calculation there?
So what people have called for is a 2-ton carbon footprint per person. Right now, for example, people in India have about 1.6 tons footprint. People in the US have a 20-ton footprint, so we're looking at massive disparity. I think one thing to recognize is that for folks in India to get to 2 tons, they kind of owed more. We talk about this as a climate debt, an emissions debt. So folks in the US have a 20-ton footprint, but really the footprint is even bigger because it's not just the fossil fuels we spend driving this year. We also have the hospitals, the roads, the schools, all the infrastructure that embodies CO2 that's been emitted a long time ago. So what realistically, I mean, what some people are calling for is a massive reduction, to 100% reduction in the US, so that people in developing countries can actually grow their economies a little bit more, so that their carbon footprint can go up past like a 2% equal distribution, so they have access to this kind of development space and atmospheric space. So we almost need to do not just equal, but developed countries need to give a little bit more than they.
All right.
Than they
Thanks. Good luck for the
Thank you very
last
much.
few hours.
Thank you very much. Good to talk to you.